Woohoo! Yep.
Yep. Is this Skrillex? What? Do we? Hello?
I just realized I'm actually not streaming my voice. We have to start over, guys.
Nice.
I guess it doesn't matter. We can clip it. Cool. Anyways, so this is the MF features preview stream. The purpose is to cover as many features as we can with people. We have a lot of upcoming features. Some of these are features that we haven't released, and some of them are very much work in progress. So the goal is to share them with all the people as soon as possible and get as much feedback as we can from others. So if people have any comments or I guess ideas, those are always super welcome. So you can share those with us on Discord. Speaking of Discord, if you haven't joined Discord yet, make sure you do. So if you go to minecraftfrontiers.com, there should be a link on the very first page directing you to Discord. So join our Discord. That's where all the fun happens, and we use it all the time internally. So public people can only see a few channels, but if you're actually on staff, there's a lot of stuff happening in the staff channels. We will be trying hopefully to talk to the general channels more over the next few months. Should be great. So the structure of the stream is I have half of the features and Tom has probably the other half. There's quite a lot to get through. There's like 20 unannounced features that we want to talk about. So we will share those, and as people have questions, you can post them into chat, either in Discord or on Twitch, and we'll be able to respond if you want to. If you're watching this on record, you can direct the questions to us either on Discord later or through our forums. So if you sign up on the forums, that's a great way to share ideas with us. Benefits of the forums are you can actually share like bigger ideas and we can go back to them much more easily. Discord is much more in the moment, so some ideas could get lost. Okay, so let's talk about the project in general first. So the project was in development for, was it 3 years, 4 years, something like that. Then we went on a break and we came back this last winter with the idea to actually release the project finally. We've been working on it for the past few months. Initially we were hoping to release much earlier, like February or March, but it's been quite a long journey. What the nice thing about this is actually we're going to be releasing with a lot more than we actually thought. So when we initially started in winter, we thought we'd just release with similar features to what we had 2 years ago, a bit more polished but similar kind of feature set. But you know, we've been working on this for 6 months now, so we will be releasing a lot more features and we have a lot more plans. And the reason for this stream is to actually share those with you and kind of make sure people are going to enjoy those features before we release them. Okay, so let's dive actually into the features. So let's talk about combat. So we have a really nice combat system. So the combat system uses stamina and different damage types. We had this 2 years ago, so I'm actually really happy with the combat. I think it's super fun, and it's fun both with NPCs and with players. It's kind of impressive. So the way it works is you have stamina, and when you attack or block, you expend your stamina, and you have to kind of balance your resources to actually be successful in combat. The other nice thing is you can either attack or defend. If you defend, you have the potential of blocking a lot of damage with your shield, so that's really nice. So if you fight other players, you have to decide, am I gonna attack the player or will I defend, kind of trick the player into attacking me while I have my shield up to block all the damage. So that's kind of the rough idea of combat that we had 2 years ago. The other thing is it's all about positioning as well, so you want to make sure, given your weapon, so weapons have different ranges and different kind of benefits, you want to be in the right place given your weapon. So if you have a really heavy weapon, you want to kind of keep your distance and then get close and deal all the damage in one blow. If you have a much more lighter weapon, you want to keep close to the enemy and keep hitting them as often as you can, because it costs a lot less stamina than if you have a really heavy weapon. One of the problems with this system for us was actually balancing this around bigger encounters. So this system works perfectly when you're fighting wolves or other players, but it's not so great if you actually want to balance it around dungeon bosses. So that was our main issue over the past few months, and we decided to actually introduce a new different combat system specifically for dungeons. So we will still keep this stamina system, but we're gonna build a team system on top of it. So let me explain the team system. It's we call it Trinity combat, but it's a variation on the classical Trinity combat you might know from other games. So this helps us balance the dungeons, because one of the problems we had with dungeons in the past is because you have a really strong enemy, it basically just obliterates players, and because we have no healers, what would happen is, like, you take 20 people, send them into the dungeon, and you hope that not, you know, maybe half of the people are gonna die because they just keep dying one by one, they cannot heal themselves, and whoever's left hopefully kills the boss in time, which wasn't too much fun, because then you have a lot of dead people that are kind of running back into the dungeon to catch up with the others. So we decided to make a Trinity combat system, which lets you sacrifice a big part of your combat for actually being really strong in one part. So we have 3 different roles. The first one is a shield bearer, then we have master of arms, and we have bards as well. So you can pick one of those 3 roles. You pick it by equipping the specific weapon set. So if you want to be a shield bearer, you have to find shield bearer shield, which is a specific variant of a shield. And if you equip that, you cannot use any other weapons, so you cannot deal any damage. But this heavy shield can actually block a lot of stuff, so it's actually strong enough to block attacks from a boss. So by using this shield, you're kind of claiming, I will be the tank of the party, and I want to be the person who blocks all the damage from the boss, hopefully. So if you use this weapon, if you want to be a tank, your focus is going to be on blocking at the right time. So it's very much focusing on the stamina system and kind of knowing the attacks that the boss is going to do and blocking at the right time. So that would be the role of the shield bearer. You can be a master of arms, so you can buy regular weapons, but you could also buy master of arms weapons. These are very heavy, which means they cannot use a shield, so you're sacrificing all your defense, but you're gonna have a lot more damage as a result. So the idea here is, if you're a master of arms, you are the person who's gonna be dealing all of the damage, but you're not gonna be able to defend yourself, and you're kind of relying on your tank to do the job for you. So this is Master of Arms, and then we have Bards, which are kind of our supportive role. So we don't have any healers. You cannot heal yourself in combat, so you kind of rely on your shield person to block the damage before it happens. But blocking the damage is gonna take a lot of stamina, because they have to lift the shield and they have to block the attacks as they come. So you, as a Bard, have the kind of option or the role of kind of filling up the mana, sorry, not mana, but stamina to all of the people in the group. So as a bard, you cannot attack, you cannot defend, but you can replenish stamina to all of the people around you. So this is going to be a really interesting supportive role. So if you want to be a good bard, you have to understand who's spending a lot of stamina. How do I deliver stamina to them? So you will have different instruments as kind of weapons, quotation marks, and you're gonna use those instruments to play music around your key people to replenish their stamina. So this is going to be your role to keep the group going. So these 3 roles, if they all come together, they can be actually a lot stronger than 3 independent people all using weapons and shields, because they are super strong in their one role. And this is going to hopefully let us balance the combat around boss encounters a lot better, to make them more fun and kind of more strategic for people. There's gonna be limited healing, so we have no healers, and there's gonna be no in-combat healing, and you will probably not even be able to heal just like dropping out of combat really quickly. So what you'll have to balance around that specific encounter, and you have to like overcome the whole monster without any healing going on. After the monster, after you kill it, we are still discussing how much healing is gonna happen. We might have specialized roles that are non-combat roles for healing, especially, or we will use alchemy to heal you up. One possibility also is that you cannot heal up fully, and you have to go back to town or find a healer to heal you back up. So that's our Trainee combat, a big update coming hopefully in the next few months. But we have a lot more features to cover, so this is one feature. There's like 15 different features on the list, so let's move on. We have signature hunts. So we have our dungeons. Our dungeons are going to be based around this Trainee combat. It's a very strategic encounter. You have to get your group together and really kind of work together to maximize the use of those 3 roles. But next to that, we have like our open world encounters. So these are encounters in the open world. You go track a very strong monster, and you find it outside in the world. This means anybody can join in. It doesn't need as much coordination as a dungeon would, because you're gonna hear later from Tom that dungeons are gonna undergo a lot of changes, and we see dungeons as a group experience that requires a lot of coordination. Signature hunts are kind of the equivalent to dungeons that doesn't require that much coordination. So it works by maybe using the executive magistrate. So if you get elected into the executive branch in the city, you will be able to trigger what we call signature hunt, which sends out a tracker NPC, I guess we could call them, and they find a really strong creature in the world. It spawns this boss into the world, and you have a limited time to go on a signature hunt. So you take as many people as you can find, you spam the world channel, if there's a world channel, probably not, but you just run around the city, shout for help, and get as many people as you can to join you on this signature hunt. So it's quite different to a dungeon, but it lets you take on a much stronger enemy than you would usually find in the world. It's gonna be extremely difficult. It's balanced not around Trainee combat, but around having a lot of people participating. So it will have a lot of damage, it will kill a lot of people, but those who survive, they will get a lot of rewards, really nice rewards. So these are signature hunts. If you have any ideas or comments about signature hunts, make sure to share them with us, because it's very much a work in progress. Okay, moving on. So far we talked about different options and different kind of choices you can make by picking up different weapons, by focusing on what you want to craft. But all of the gameplay that we had so far is kind of horizontal, which means at any point in time you can participate in any activity, and you can be the best person in that activity given you have the right amount of resources. This is good. I think having a lot of options is really nice, but also having specialization is great. And we did not have specialization in our previous tests, but we want to have specialization going forward when we release. So there's going to be what we call Specialization Guilds, and this is going to be an option for you as a player to choose a specific guild to grow in. So you're going to pick a group, and the group is going to be devoted to a very specific profession. So you can, as a warrior, maybe you can pick the Shield Bearer Guild, and even though you can be Shield Bearer, Master of Arms, or a Bard at any given time, if you pick the Shield Bearer Guild, you will be specializing in that guild. So spending a lot of time as a Shield Bearer, you will be training up your kind of role in the guild that you selected, and you will be getting specific special skills and, I guess, specializations to perform at that role a lot better. So what we are aiming to achieve with this is to have specialization of players. So we don't have every single player be capable of doing every single thing to the highest level. We will have every single player, they can do all of the things to a very high level, but if you want to be the best kind of person at a profession, you would have to specialize in that role. And hopefully this is going to let you be a specialist in something, and other people will have to go to you to get the highest level goods or the highest level kind of performance in combat. So what we're thinking right now, this is all subject to change, is having a lot of these guilds, a lot of these specialization paths, and you might be able to pick one combat path and one non-combat path. So you might be able to pick to be the bard, be in the bard guild, and maybe at the same time be a tailor, right, to make clothes for people. If you're a tailor, you can still craft all of the other things, and you will be able to craft weapons, most of them, but maybe for like the highest, like most endgame items, you will be only able to really craft your own specialized stuff. Let us know what you really think about this. We want a lot of input on this because we didn't have specialization before, but we're thinking it could help the game quite a lot to actually have specialization. So this is Specialization Guilds. How do you actually progress in those guilds? So the guild is not necessarily a physical location, but it's just a specialization that you pick. And to progress in that specialization, you will need to participate in specific repeatable quests that are going to be present in the world. With these quests, we don't really see them as kind of stuff you have to grind. You don't have to participate in those all the time, but there's going to be stuff happening in the world as you kind of travel around the world. So if you move around, you're going to see things happening around you. Maybe people are getting attacked, and this is going to be quite a real dynamic quest that you can participate in. And participating in these encounters, maybe it's better to call them encounters and not necessarily quests, but kind of helping people around the world as you kind of bump into people. This is going to really give you reputation increases, but also specialist increases if you help people in a specific way. So if people are getting obliterated and you are the shield bearer and you kind of help them as a shield bearer, you will be getting points in your shield bearer category if you pick that category. And this is going to let you progress in that specialist guild. So the goal of having repeatable quests is to have a lot of dynamic stuff happening around the world and give you a lot of options to participate in a lot of things. So repeatable quests are going to happen around the world at different times, and they're going to let you participate in a lot of stuff basically. There's going to be different things, so there's going to be very different varied quests. So some of them are going to be go here and kill this powerful enemy, but the others could be, could you craft me this item, or could you escort me to this location, or could you go and harvest this specific thing, and I don't know where it is, but you as a harvester will have to go out and actually obtain this for me. So there's gonna be a huge variety of different types of quests for different types of players. Okay, moving on. So quests are quite narrow. So all of the things that I just mentioned are quite simple. It's like go here, kill this thing, or find this thing for me, or craft this thing, right? It's all very straightforward. And usually it's kind of specific to one person at a time. So it doesn't require a lot of people to partake in the quest, right? It's quite localized to you as a person or that specific encounter. Next to that, what we're gonna have is what we call conflict zones. So conflict zones are much bigger, not necessarily quests, but bigger encounters that happen at specific times. And these are not like one kind of goal, but these are events in the world that happen driven by the environment with a larger amount of NPCs and goals at the same time. So imagine you go to a village and the village is being attacked by a bandit assault, and the assault is quite big. There's ships coming in and there's ships on the beach, and you can see bandits kind of unloading from those ships, and they're moving on to the village, right? So you as a person have to go into the zone and kind of solve the conflict somehow. We call them conflict zones because there's usually going to be multiple factions in that zone fighting with each other, and you, depending on which side you pick, you will have different objectives. So if you want to help that village, you might talk to the villager NPC to kind of register yourself as the villager in that scenario, and you will have the objectives of stopping the bandits, taking over some of the key areas, key objectives, and pushing them back to the boat and kind of stopping them from attacking the village, right? Or you could be taking on the role of the bandits. So this is declaring I want to be a bandit, and you will have different objectives. So you might have to take over specific houses in the village, stop the other player villagers from pushing you back, and maybe have some PvP happening at the same time. So these conflict zones are encounters in the world. They are quite big and they let you participate in multiple objectives at the same time and possibly having multiple sides to the encounter, so people can actually compete with each other for these strategic resources. Okay, so these are conflict zones. The conflict zones are gonna be automatically driven by the system, so we don't have to do any manual work in those. So they're going to be programmed by us, they're going to be designed by us, by the devs and by the team, but as they happen there's no actual involvement of the staff in those events. They're quite automatic with set objectives that you have to kind of follow through. Next to those we will have what we call events, and events are actually pretty impressive. We have quite a lot of them designed, and these are going to be actually led by the staff. So this means every single event is quite curated. It's a very high quality experience tailored to the players, and it's gonna have a lot of staff taking part as well to make sure the experience is delivered in the way that we want to deliver it. We have two different types of events. I think we announced this in the past. So we will have community events. So community events are basically our staff hopping into the server and playing alongside other players. So the idea here is we want to get in touch with players, we want to have some fun with players, and we want to make something fun for the players as well, right? So when you join in on a Saturday evening, you want to do something special perhaps. You could do it on your own, but having staff there kind of directing the experience could be really fun. So these are community events. They're usually going to take place in one evening and they're going to be finished in one evening. So it's kind of one-off event. There could be an objective that you have to meet, and if you meet that objective you get some limited reward to kind of reward you for partaking in that event. Next to those we're going to have campaign events. So our current plan is to have one weekend we're going to have a community event, and the other weekend we're going to have a campaign event. Those community events are going to be isolated to that specific weekend. They're not going to happen again. They're going to be one-off. But campaign events are going to happen every other week, and they're going to be linked to each other. So a campaign is going to last for a longer period of time, perhaps a few months, and it's going to have specific different arcs. So what we call a story arc is actually a 3-month or 4-month period that has a bigger kind of, I guess, story feel to it. You could see it like as a book. So a book usually has a theme and it has a few chapters, so we call them chapters as well. A chapter could take 1 month or 2 months, depending on how we space it out. A chapter is usually 4 episodes, and each episode is gonna take place on a weekend, right? So the first kind of story, I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's gonna have to do with bandits, and you have to figure out what's happening with the bandits on the island, where they're coming from, what do they want, how do we deal with them, and you're gonna uncover all of those things through a highly curated story that has been set up for you, and it's gonna be delivered over the weekends. So this is gonna take 5 to 6 months. Once that is finished, it's gonna have a clear every chapter, so every four weeks or 4 weekends, you're gonna have like so it's like a milestone, and the milestone is going to have a very impactful change to the server. So depending on what people do in those events, you're going to have different features and different items and different stuff happening in the world. So it's actually super important to take part in those events and drive the server in a very specific way. So those are events. Let's move on to some more wild features coming up. So one of them is musicians and dance. So we're planning to have musical instruments, and we're thinking we could let players compose their own music and play their own music to other people around them to bring some life to the taverns around the island. And probably also have like a dance mini game. So we could have dance competitions driven by a dance plugin. So you could go into a pub and some people could play music in that pub, and you could join in on the dance competition to compete with other players in a very PvP, non-combat, but tight competitive experience in a pub. So that's something fun that we are planning down the road. Okay, so let's move on. We're making a lot of changes to our plots as well. So with the plots, we have plots, and you can build houses to those in those plots. And what we're changing is if you build a specific house, you're gonna get specific items on a regular basis. So if you buy a fisherman's shack, you will be getting a supply of special fish that are only available in that specific house. So what we want to achieve with this is kind of give more reason to owning a house. So if you want to own a specific house, it's going to give you a big benefit in a crafting discipline linked to that house. Not all houses are going to be linked to a specific crafting discipline. Some of them are going to give you combat benefits or political benefits or exploration benefits, but every single house is going to have a purpose, and that purpose is going to be shown to you by the design of the house, but also by the items that you get through the house. So you can be a lot more strategic with which house you want to buy. Hopefully it's going to be a lot more fun owning a house. We also have custom blocks. So custom blocks is something we're going to be using in our dungeons, and Tom can tell you a lot more about that in the next few minutes. But custom block let us, I guess, define any sort of script with any kind of block. That's quite a general way to put it, but what this means is we can have all sorts of interactions happening in a house or in a dungeon. So in a dungeon, Tom will cover that, but in a house that could mean having special appliances that you have to use to maybe sharpen your weapons or to craft very specific items, or a mailbox. So Tom is saying there's gonna be mailboxes as well where you can take out your items from. So if you order items, or if you subscribe to our subscription, or if you get items through the house, it's all gonna be delivered to a mailbox. So a mailbox is an example of a custom block in a house. Okay, moving on. There's a few more things for me. So corporations. So corporations are our version of guilds. So sometimes you wanna buy a very expensive house, but it's just too expensive for a single player, right? So some of the bigger plots in the city, they're intentionally designed to be too big for a single player to own, because we want people to actually group up together to purchase these bigger houses together. So this could be like a guild hall that's massive, right? It could be as big as the town square. And to purchase that, you will need a lot more players to come together. To formalize that relationship with other players, we're going to be establishing something called corporations. So a corporation is a group of players that they sign up for the same corporation, and what they can do is they can tax each other. So you can decide, okay, the corporation will take 25% of all of the income of all the members. It's going to go to the corporation bank account, and from the corporation bank account, hopefully it's going to grow over time, and we can purchase the most expensive houses from that account. If the corporation buys a house on behalf of the corporation, all the members of the corporation will have full access to the house probably, and perhaps we will let the corporation members decide on different like permission ranks. So you can have corporation owners, and you can decide these players can go in but they cannot use the bank, and all of these players can go in and use the bank in our corporation house. Hopefully this is gonna let people participate in guilds or corporations together, which is a feature that a lot of people requested that we did not want to deliver in the past, because we thought it's going to be competing with the political system, but making it a corporation kind of responsible for buying houses, I think it doesn't compete with politics at all. It's quite separate to that. Last feature for me is a recipes overhaul. So we have been thinking a lot about recipes, how to change them, how to make them more fun. So with the recipes that we're going to be releasing with, they're going to be quite different to the recipes you've seen in the past. So these new recipes, they're going to require much more variety of sources. So this means the items you need for the recipe are not just going to come from harvesting or crafting. They will come from loot, they will come from imports, so through the political branches. They will come from housing, so that's the new thing. You will need specific houses to craft specific items. And they will come from the specialized guilds as well. So you will need to specialize in a guild. Let's say you want to be the weaponsmith, and if you become a part of the weaponsmithing guild, you can progress in that guild to get specific items needed to craft the best swords. So this is going to make recipes a lot more diverse in the future. There's going to be new professions as well. So professions are our crafting disciplines. We will have cooking. Blacksmithing is broken down now into weaponsmithing and armor smithing, because there's a lot of weapons and armor. There's going to be jewelry making, alchemy, carpentry, and curating. And there's going to be shipbuilding as well. So shipbuilding is a very new thing that Tom will tell you more about, but it's got to do with expeditions and kind of setting off into new worlds probably. So that's all from me. If you have any questions about any of the features I mentioned, make sure to let us know. So you can let us know on the forums, or in Twitch chat, or in Discord if you want to. Tom, do you want to take it on from here?
Sure. So some of the features that I'm going to be talking about are kind of larger community-based ones, so a lot of collaboration are required for them. So the first one is going to be outlined as calling them community goals. The idea of them is they're these goals that ultimately end up shaping the world. So the idea of this is if some event is happening through our lore or through different corporations or different events that are happening, a community goal might be made that just is constantly running until either a deadline or until it's completed. So maybe just to give a bit of an example of one that might happen is, say in our lore the mainland is at the community goal would be that the entire island as a whole would need to export enough weapons to be able to fund that war or have enough weapons for the war. And if they don't complete it within a specific time frame, then the mainland might impose super large tax on the island. So the idea is that you want to contribute towards these. Sometimes different players want different outcomes. So community goals could potentially be beneficial for some people and not beneficial for others. So it's something to always want to keep an eye on and possibly contribute. And then kind of leading out community goals is a feature that we're calling expeditions. Expeditions are a new way of getting a new opportunity to explore new regions / locations. So right now, based off of anyone who played in the previous versions, we always had a static island with a single island that had only one town in it, and you really couldn't leave that island. There was lots to do, but you could never leave it, and there was only occasional content generated. The idea behind expedition is basically a ship is sent off at some point that is off to go find a new location. These new locations could be new islands that are just wilderness that might have some key locations. It could be a new dungeon. It could be pretty much any new type of physical location. So this is where we play. So we have 3 stages for expeditions. So one we're calling funding, one that we're calling navigating, and one called exploration. So the first stage is funding. For the funding stage, basically the entire town, so the government could play a part in this, is you need to build up enough money that can pay for sending off a ship full of NPCs to go find a new location. So the funding period could be of any length. There's no really deadline on it, but once the funds are achieved, then the NPCs go off to navigate. On top of the funding is you need a ship for the expedition, so this is where a community goal might be made for shipbuilding, but people would need to contribute towards building that can be used for it. The second stage is navigating. So this is a bit of a kind of pause period, you could call it. So not too much is going to change on the island, but the NPCs will go off looking for the location. This could span really any length of time. Could be 1 day, 2 days, 2 weeks. Really depends on what they end up finding. And when they come back, we enter into stage 3, which is the exploration. This is when players are now able to go to this new region. So you have to go to the docks. You got to take a ship that only leaves a while to take you to that location. Currently, we're thinking maybe like the ship leaves once every hour, maybe. So you need to time your period of leaving with the schedule for ships. So this is a new way for us to introduce new content, new options for people playing. And so one of the main initial things we're going to be focused on for expeditions is new dungeons. So throughout our current game world, we have about 10 dungeons. They're very extensive, they're quite large, but eventually players will eventually explore them all, so that's where expeditions will come to play. But some of the new features of the new dungeons is, before we were restricted by physical world size, so we were having trouble with fitting in all of our dungeons in large scale. So something that we've done is we've been able to pull out these dungeons into separate locations, which gives us a lot more space to work. So we've been building out some really cool tooling for us that allows us to generate these huge base dungeons that have a lot of new possibilities. So using the custom scripts or custom blocks that Thomas talked about earlier, we can now do new mechanics in dungeons. So we've been experimenting lately, but could be fake walls are within the dungeon, so you have to do some actions. Maybe you have to find a button somewhere, a new passageway. That might be a shortcut. A room might become poisoned if you enter incorrectly into it. If you're walking on a floor could crumble away and you end up falling 3, 4, 5 floors down in the dungeon. So there's all these different things that are going to be happening within the dungeon. They're not just some static build. They're going to be constantly changing. One player could enter in, go one pathway, and their route gets closed behind them. And so maybe they get split away from their party and they have to find a way of finding them again. So these dungeons are really a big investment we're doing, and we really want to create a new dynamic. And at least for most dungeons, there will be one boss located in it. The idea is that you go into these in a group situation. So you have your bard, you have your tank, and you have your warrior, I believe it's called. And then after fighting the boss, there is some very large reward that you come out with that could contribute to other things going on in the island. These dungeons are repeatable, so the idea is the first time you go through it is not the same as the second time you go through it. New routes could be open for you, but the boss will also be coming back eventually after a certain amount of time, so you get to experience that again. Something that's also important is throughout the dungeon you might find some resources. So there might be chests located, there could be really anything that you could get different type of resources through loot or chests or anything. The thing is you have to make it out of the dungeon. So something that we were experiencing last time is you'd run into a dungeon and then just let the mobs kill you and you respawn with all your stuff again. But when you're in a dungeon, if you die, you lose everything you collected in the dungeon. So you still get to keep your items, you still have to pay the fee for respawning, but you don't get to keep the stuff that you have collected. So you have to make it all the way out again. That leads into kind of the next thing a little bit. So with this changing with the changing of our combat a little bit, we want to allow players to have combat with each other. So in the original release that we did 2 years ago or so, we had combat enabled with players, so PvP was enabled, but we found that caused problems, and so we ultimately at this point have disabled PvP entirely. But to replace that experience, we're introducing two things. One thing, it's called Duels, and then Battle Arena. So Duels, in this case, can happen anywhere in the world. It could happen in a dungeon, it could happen in the city. But basically you make a formal request with another player, they have to accept your request, and then an opportunity is given to you to place a wager on it. So this wager could be money, it could be items, really anything that you might possess on your character at that time. When you've made the wager and you both accept it, those items are taken away from you, and then you enter into you put into a PvP state. You can fight each other, you can't fight anyone else, just the two people, and there's one round. And whoever ends up almost dying, you don't actually die when you duel, you get down to half health. Half of a heart left at the end. You basically, you go down to that last heart, and then whoever wins receives the wager. In this scenario, so that's for informal kind of fighting with players. In a more formal scenario, other players might want to place wagers on fights. So that's where the battle arena comes in. For people who played on the server in the past, you might remember the arena that was in the main town. Well, we are now utilizing that arena. in this battle arena, there are going to be, at least initially, there are going to be two fighting modes. We're going to call it, one's called Level Ground, and the other one's called Ultimate Challenger. In Level Ground, players will come in, they don't need to have any equipment to begin with. They get to choose from a preset that are available, and you'll be given to. So this allows for a level ground between the two players. You can't come in with some super strong weapon against a super weak player. And then Ultimate Challenger is you get to bring your... So this is where it's really about strategy and finding good weapons and shields and armor. And you really want to try to bring the best of the best. In this case, anyone can place a wager on a fight, so they'll be happening a bit more on intervals. So usually what happens is you'll schedule a fight, so at a certain period it'll occur, and that gives a period of time for anyone to place wagers on it. If your wager is correct in the end, you end up receiving a bonus, and then as well as the fighter. The fighter also gets from any wagers placed on them. As well as there are multiple rounds for the fight. So instead of just the duel being one round, there are multiple rounds to compete. So it's not just you lose once and you lose everything. So it's a bit more long term and makes it a bit more tough. And then with that, there's going to be a leaderboard that goes with the battle arena. If you sit on the top of the battle on the leaderboard, you end up actually receiving some sort of compensation. So it is beneficial to fight in the arena. You got to continue to fight though. You can't just sit on top of the leaderboard. If you become inactive for too long, you automatically get removed. But you could be paid in gold, or you might receive some new weaponry, or you might get some new perks that's related to combat. And then previously, Thomas talked about mailboxes being in plots. So we have a new system. It's just mail, is what we're calling it. But it basically allows for items to be sent to players. This could be from subscriptions, like Thomas said. Could be your plot provides you with items that'll be sent to your mailbox. And then we're also going to allow players to mail stuff to each other. The thing to note is that it's incredibly slow to send stuff to mail. So we want to encourage players to continue to interact with each other. That means to make mail not too strong and that it doesn't persuade people to no longer communicate with each other, is that it will take 2 weeks in real life time to get an item from one person to the next. So the moment it leaves your mailbox and goes to someone else, it'll be gone for 2 weeks until it arrives in the other person's mailbox. It's also very expensive, so you have to pay gold for each time you. So you gotta kind of plan that out well. It's a good way if you want to send like maybe a surprise gift on their birthday or something. And then something else we experienced last time in our previous prototypes is farming or resource gathering. We are overhauling that quite a bit. We found that some resources were a lot more overpowered than others. So to combat that, resources in general are going to be a lot slower to grow. So a farm, once you collect, say, the wheat from it, it's going to be a lot slower to actually have it grow back and be available for collection again. This will make food a little harder to make, but food will be a bit more rewarding as well. And I'll talk about briefly about our new system in a second as well. The other thing too is we're at this point we're thinking, we haven't really finalized it yet, but we're looking into maybe having some sort of ownership system for farms to encourage people to maybe get into owning and managing a farm and becoming kind of a resource point for people to come to buy I don't know, any type of resource that might grow from plants. And then the final kind of feature I'm going to talk about is our new food system. So in the before 2 years ago, we pretty much allowed you to eat anything. So you could eat some really bad bread forever and ever, and really have no problem. You just have to eat a lot of it because it didn't provide much saturation. To kind of curve away from that and encourage people to build kind of the higher tier food, is you now have what I guess we're calling a taste palette. So when you join the server for the first time, randomly assigned taste palettes provided to you, and you kind of have to figure out what food is good. If you don't like a food, you actually end up harming yourself. You actually end up losing saturation because you end up throwing it up if you really dislike it. But if you find a really good food that you do really like, you actually end up gaining a lot more saturation than before. On top of this is a nutrition system. The nutritions is you kind of need to have a balanced diet. You can't just eat all bread. You need to eat grains, vegetables, fruit, and protein, and there might be one more that I'm forgetting. But there is something you kind of have to manage. It's a slow decay, but it will tie a little bit closely to your stamina. At least we're thinking that initially, is that it'll be close to your stamina. So if you have a balanced diet and you are treating your diet well, your stamina bar will have more capacity, which might make you a better fighter. So there is very good benefits for you to manage your food very closely. That's kind of it from me. As always, questions can also be posed in the Discord channel. Any thoughts, suggestions, anything that people from before thought that we should change based off of what we talked about today. We'd love to get that feedback. I'm not sure if Thomas has anything else he wants to mention.
Not really. I think that's all. So if you have any questions, let us know on the forums or Discord. It's great. We need all the feedback we can get to make it as fun as possible. Yeah, that sounds great. Do you have any closing remarks? I don't have any.
Not really.
No, so we just want to share as many features as we could with the players. There's gonna be a lot more coming as well, so this is not everything. If you have any requests, always let us know. So the server's gonna be evolving until we release it, and after we release it as well. So it's a lot of space to make anything happen. So because we used all of our plugins on our custom, we can do whatever we want. Maybe Tom and Alex will not be Alex and Tom will not be happy because they have to make it happen. But we can. Yeah, there's no limits to your imagination.
Also, we're going to try to get rid of our radio silence that somehow might appear in the general channel. We're aiming to start doing about every 2 weeks, have some sort of official post of kind of something new that we're showcasing that maybe hasn't been shown before. So we want to kind of get you guys more involved, get you guys have a picture of what's going on moving forward. So 2 weeks from now, we'll probably have some sort of video or forum post or something that will kind of outline something specific. So look forward to that.
Cool, awesome. So that's it from us. Just keep watching the forums, sign up if you haven't, and join the Discord as well. That's it. I don't know when we'll see you again, probably in a few weeks. Cool. Take care.